Hello learners, welcome back. Today we'll be covering Unit 2, All My Sons, a detailed study. This is from IGNOU BEGC 105, American Drama and American Literature. The previous unit was American Drama and Introduction, and this is All My Sons, a detailed study, which is a play written by Arthur Miller, one of the greatest American playwrights. Okay, so let us start with the introduction. All My Sons opened at Coronet Theatre in January 1947 and ran for 328 performances. 4 years earlier, Arthur Miller had read the account of the Truman Committee investigation into allegedly faulty airplane parts manufactured in Ohio. The actual idea of the play came to his mind when he got to know about a family where a daughter had taken her father to the authorities for selling faulty machines to the army. Now, 2 points to be noted here. First is this, and the second is this. Miller decided to write the play so that even the actual criminal on reading it would have to say that it was true and sensible as his life. This is the second point that should be marked. These are notes. All My Sons was extremely popular among the audiences. The success of the play earned great reputation for the author and secured his financial position. Structure and plot of All My Sons. All My Sons is a well constructed and realistic play. It is a conventional realism. What is conventional realism? Conventional and realism, these are not together, these are two separate words. So, conventional means behaving in a traditional or normal way, and realism means showing things as they really are. So, it was showing things as they really were means it was showing things as they really were in a traditional way, as the earlier writers used to do. It means it wasn't something new, it was just realism as it had been going on from the previous ages, as the techniques that the writer had used from the previous ages or from early times to show realism, the same techniques were used in this play too. Ibsenite only in that Miller, as Ibsen so often does, starts in the middle of things and spends most of the play uncovering the facts of the past so that the audience can see the last act consequences in the present. So it's saying that Ibsenite only, so this play is in the Ibsenite form, but only because as Ibsen does, then so does Miller, starts in the middle of things. So Ibsen and Miller both start in the. Ibsen was famous for this special technique of writing. He started in the middle of things and explained the past things while moving on with the play. So he explained the past with the present, or in the present he would take some situations or wove some stories into it to explain the past circumstances. In the just like the Iliad is written, the Iliad. And now moving on, this they're saying that this is the only form in which Miller is similar to Ibsen, or Miller has used the Ibsenite techniques in this play, because Miller also starts in the middle of things and then spends most of the play uncovering the facts of the past so that the audience can see uh, how the last act consequences in the present, that what were the consequences that led to the last act of the present time. Okay, so what were the past consequences that led to this situation? So that's why Miller had to continuously explain the past sequences, the past drama, what the things were, what the background of the story was. The work of Ibsen influenced All My Sons structurally as well, for Ibsen had liberally applied the principle of Greek theatre that stresses the influence of the past on the present. So they're saying that the work of Ibsen was a Norwegian playwright, as we have already discussed previously, and it influenced All My Sons structurally. So it influenced its structure. For Ibsen had liberally applied the principle of Greek theatre, so he had openly applied, or liberally means at his own liberty, he had applied the principle of Greek theatre that stresses the influence of the past on the present. So Greek theater used to stress on the past so that it could explain what the present consequences are related to, or what has the past consequence, why the present is like this, how the how the present is influenced by the past. So this was the Greek theater's strategy of writing plays. And Ibsen has also used this strategy very liberally to his own freedom, to his own liberty. The play is carefully constructed and well knit. Knit means unite or cause to unite. So the play is well united. It follows the pattern in which there is an appropriate link between previous actions and present consequences. We've already been talking about this for the past 2-3 minutes, so I guess this is uh, basically clear. So Miller skillfully observes all the three dramatic unities of time, place, and action. And if you remember correctly, there were these three unities in your previous year: unity of time, unity of action, and unity of place. So unity of time said that the play must start and end within a time span of 24 hours. Unity of place said that the play must take place in a single place or in a single settings. And unity of action said that that there should be a single sequence of actions, that there was some actions that led to some consequences, and then sum it up all up. So it was basically that there has to be some simple string of actions with consequences and their relatives. Miller skillfully observes all the trade mentioned by Aristotle in his Poetics. So a Poetics was, I guess, a small book written by Aristotle. I even have that book. It's actually very small. The unity of time limits the action to take place in roughly a single day. Not so it's a single day, but not by 12 hours or 24 hours, including the night. Unity of place limits it to one general location, and the unity of action limits it to a single set of incidents which are related by cause and effect, which are related as cause and effect, having a beginning, middle, and an end. The play does not cross the time limit of 24 hours, thus the unity of time is observed by Miller. And like I told you in the previous video, I am hoping that you have already read the actual play before listening to the before viewing this video, because this is basically what it is. Yeah, it's a detailed study. Okay, we're not gonna tell you what the actual play is line by line. This is basically just a study of the complete play. So, like I said, you should have read the actual play. So the play does not cross the time limit of 24 hours. Thus, the unity of time is observed by Miller. The play maintains the unity of place with the entire action taking place in the Keller home in the American town of Detroit. The unity of place and action is also observed in the play. The action happens in the backyard of the Keller household. This unity owes a great deal to the conduct of a single character, Joe Keller. So all these unities were possible due to the behavior of one single character, that is Joe Keller. The setting of All My Sons is designed to suit Keller's myopic worldview of not thinking beyond his family interests. Myopic means short-sighted. So basically, he had a short-sighted worldview, that there were only a few things that were dear and near to him, and the others were basically, he didn't care about all the other things. So he didn't take into consideration the greater good. You can say he was a bit of a kind of selfish man, but in according to the play, selfish for his family's good, selfish for his family. So he wasn't selfish for himself. You can say he was selfish for his family, but he had a myopic worldview, definitely, because he was short-sighted. He didn't take into consideration anything beyond his own family or its interests. Now, the backyard of the Keller home in the outskirts of an American town. The stage is hedged on right and left by tall, closely planted poplars, which lend the yard a secluded atmosphere. So the stage is hedge. Hedge. I'm sure you know the boundaries of small trees that we often plant around our parks or our homes to get a hedge. I'm sure you know what hedge is. So the stage is hedged on the right and left, so there are hedges on the right and left. And which trees have been used to make this hedge? These are the poplar trees. Poplar is a tall and fast growing tree of northern temperate regions, It is widely grown in shelter belts, and it's used for timber and pulp basically. So this tree is basically used for timber and pulp. So it is grown on the right and left side of the stage to make a kind of hedge. And this gives since it is a tall tree, so it basically cuts off the this place from the other surroundings. That's why the yard seems gives a little secluded atmosphere. Secluded means sheltered or private, so it gives a private atmosphere to the place. At the right, beside the house, the entrance of the driveway can be seen, but the poplars cut off view of its continuation downstage. So the poplars are so tall and big that they cut off the view of its going downstage. The scenic image successfully hides Keller's secret. So this it is a scenic image. It is a very beautiful image, and it is successful in hiding Keller's dark and deep secrets. But it gradually discloses, but the secrets of the Keller household gradually discloses as the play proceeds. So the Keller household, as good as beautiful as it looks from the outside, it hides a very deep and dark secret that we are about to discover. The play All My Sons is divided into three acts. Three acts, I'm sure what you know what acts are. That roughly cover 18 hours from Sunday morning. So now you there in unit of time it was said that the play must finish within a span of 24 hours. So it can finish before 24 hours, but that it should not exceed the time limit of 24 hours. So 18 hours is still within the unit of time, but 25 hours, 26 hours, anything about after 24 hours is not in the unit of time. So you can finish your play before 24 hours, it would still be counted in unit of time, but not after it. So the play All My Sons is divided into three acts that roughly cover 18 hours from Sunday morning to the early hours of Monday. The entire action takes place in the backyard of the house of Joe Keller. Joe Keller is the main character here, a rich industrialist. The Keller home includes his wife Kate in her early 50s. She's in her early 50s, means from 50 to 55 or 54, sorry. It's somewhere in between 50 to 54. And their 32-year-old son Chris. Their neighbors, who are also their family friends, comprise 40-year-old Dr. Jim Ballis, his wife Sue, around 40, their 8-year-old son Bert. I know 40-year couple and 8-year-old son, but who cares? 32-year-old Frank Lube and his 27-year-old wife Lydia. Yeah, now again 5 years gap, but I guess they were modern people. So Miller has successfully worked on the exposition of the plot, gradually increase dramatic tension as we move ahead in the play. So exposition means a comprehensive description and explanation of an idea of theory. So it means that he has very well explained this plot. He has done a very good job in explaining in detail the plot of the story. And he has and the dramatic tension is, it's not like the dramatic tension suddenly spikes up in the middle of the play and then suddenly there is the book play is very completely boring and there's no fun interest in the play. The dramatic tension gradually increases in the play as we go on with it, so it keeps on the interest of the viewers, or the person reading the play in today's time. So the person reading the play is glued to the play because the dramatic tension moves increasingly towards the end of the play. In the first act, Miller gives background information revealing certain facts about the past, taking his own time as the playwright Ibsen did. So in the first act, there's no hurry to complete or finish off the play. We're taking our time, moving slowly, revealing certain facts about the past that are necessary in order to understand the present circumstances. In Act 1, the play opens with Joe Keller reading the Sunday newspaper. So, this is the start of the play. The play starts with Joe Keller reading the Sunday newspaper like any normal guy would, while involved in travel talks with his neighbor Dr. Jim Bellis. So, as you can see, that the play is made very realistic. So, any normal person or any normal household could be seen. The elders are sitting outside reading newspaper, talking with each other. This is a very simple thing, not something heroic or dramatic or tragic that should be involved in that should be included in a play, or that we will often see in a movie, right? This does not heightens our emotions. You can say this is not melodramatic in any sense. It's a very simple day-to-day thing. So in the first In Act 1, the play opens with Joe Keller reading the Sunday newspaper while involved in tribal talks with his neighbor Dr. Jim Ballis, later joined by another neighbor Frank Lube. The fallen apple tree snapped under the wind's fury caught their attention. So beside them, there's a apple tree that has snapped from between, or snapped under the wind's fury, that is under the storm, and it has caught their attention. This scene is significant as it acquaints us with the background of the play, giving a flashback about Larry. So until now, we didn't know about the character Larry, but this scene is important because this scene will tell us, give us a brief, give us some brief overview about Larry. Who Larry is, what's his role in the play. The apple tree was planted to keep Joe Keller's son Larry's memory alive. So Larry was Joe Keller's son, and this apple tree was planted in his memory to keep his memory alive. Who had been reported missing during the war. So he was reported missing during the war while flying a mission off the coast of China. So he was given a mission off the coast of China. It means nearby the coast of China, and he went missing during that mission. And he was presumed to be dead because it had been many years since there had been any news of him. So thought that he was most likely dead. He had died during that mission. However, Larry's mother does not believe that Larry is dead and is hopeful that one day he would come back safe. This belief of hers plays a major role in the development of the plot, as we shall see later. Now, another character is introduced to us. A young woman, Anne, has come to visit the Kellers on Chris' incitation. Incitation is what? Encouragement or persuasion or urging. So, a young woman, Anne, has come to the Kellers because Chris encouraged her or persuaded her to come. Chris, as we know, is the son of Frank and Kate. Sorry, not Frank and Kate. Sorry, Joe. Joe and Kate. Joe Keller and Kate. Anne and Chris are in love, and after writing letters to each other for 2 years, Chris has now invited her in order to propose to her. Chris discloses to his father about his intention of marrying Anne. Keller obviously discourages him from marrying Anne because, in the opinion of Chris' mother Kate, Anne is Larry's fiancée. Kate believes that Larry is alive and would turn up any day. So I know this is very mixed up and tangled and hard to understand what is going on. But as we will finish up with this play, you will be able to understand what the play was about, what was the beginning, middle, and end of the play. Right now, it's all jumbled up and confusing. But after we're done with this unit, you will understand how the play moves on, how the play is woven. So N is the daughter of Steve Deaver. Sorry, I didn't mark any notes, right? I think we should take some notes up to here. No. Here to here. This is also important. Now, if you don't remember the unit of time, action, place, you can also mark everything from here to here. From here, if you don't remember the unit of time, action, and place, then you can also note down this part so that it can help you later as a revision. This is also important. And then, yeah, Keller, so you can write it as that Keller has a myopic, you can start this as Keller has a myopic worldview of not thinking beyond his family interests, right? Then the scenic image, you should write it here as the scenic image of Joe Keller's house. here. So you should start it as the scenic image of Joe Keller's house successfully hides his secrets. So this is how it will go. The scenic image of Joe Keller's house. Then after this, then start from successfully hides cut Keller's right his secrets, but gradually discloses them as the play proceeds. And to the morning, right? This is also important. And the entire action takes place in the house of the Keller backyard backyard of house of the Joe Keller. Okay, so up to here, just a rich industrialist. Yeah, this is okay, and their neighbors. If you want to write about Joe Keller and his son Chris and all that, you can note all this from here to here. You can note all of it, but I don't think it would be important, because by the time we finish with the other 3 units also, you'd most likely remember who Joe Keller was, who Chris was, what their ages was, and their neighbors and all that stuff, all the other characters. So if you still wish to write it, you can write it somewhere else, so you can have a quick revision of them whenever you read it. I would show you how I have woven the plot. Let me suppose. So let me show you how I have actually made notes for this to remember all the characters and their names. This is how I made it. So I've written the characters like here. Joe Keller made a short diagram, so give me a quick revision about it. Then I've written the summary of the play, the actual summary about all of the play. Like this. And after that, here I've gone on to write some major or important points about the play, and some important words like here: conventional, realism, Ibsenite. I've written the important words in between it. So these are all the notes of these 3 units. So if you want, you can just write these notes down first, if you wish to. Just now I've made separate notes for all of these topics, like drama as a tragedy. This is a separate note here, from here to here. And then I've written their characterization. This is Joe Keller's characterization. And then again, because the topic changes, so I've also made separate notes for this. Thematic concerns. This is for theme of these are the notes for themes of social responsibility. And this is problems of Chris marriage as theme, idealism as theme here, father son relationship as theme, actions and their consequences as theme here, mother son relationship. So there are around 30 pages of notes, or maybe 40, you can say. But these notes cover everything, like everything in this block here. Now these are the characters. This is the characterization. This is the characterization of Joe Keller here. Then after Joe Keller, there's the characterization of Chris. Where's Chris? Here it's Chris Keller's characterization. And I think I've already reached here. I haven't covered anything more than this. Okay, now back to our files. Back to our notes now. Miller has skillfully, as we move ahead in the first act. Now these things may seem not important, but actually these are the very important things in the exams, because this is what they ask. And one tip, now they're definitely gonna ask you bigger questions like 5 marks, 10 marks, not 5 marks obviously, 10 marks, 15 marks, even 20 marks questions, right? So what will you do in it? You don't have so much stuff to write. So what you do, that you write the story again and again and again in all the questions. Okay, you start in the stories. You start from the beginning of the story. Start writing the story. Then what the question has asked, write it somewhere in the middle of it. Maybe of 3 to 4 marks. That's all right. Okay, you just need to write the actual matter of only 2, 3, 4, 5 marks, and then again start writing the end of the story. So you just have to write the story again and again and again in all those questions, with the actual matter in between of some around 3 to 4 marks for a 20 marks question, and that's all. Okay, you don't need, do not need to write like, if they've asked that do you think that Joe Keller was guilty of his crimes? Suppose this is the question, and this question is worth 20 marks. Now, how are you going to fill up 5 to 6 pages about your views on whether Joe Keller was guilty or not guilty? Obviously, you don't have so much data about Joe Keller, nor can you write so much about a person. If he is guilty or not guilty, you can maybe take into under certain circumstances, you can take into consideration his character and other things, but it will only fill up 1 page or 2 page maximum. How are you going to fill 5, 6 pages about this thing? So what you do is you start writing the story, that this is what Joe Keller did, this is what happened, this is what happened then, and then you start linking these things together. You said that because Joe Keller did this, then this happened, and Chris reacted in this way, and Joe Keller's wife reacted in this way, his neighbors reacted in this way. And then you write in the middle that I believe Joe Keller was guilty or not guilty for his crime. This reasons. You can write some 2 to 3 marks matter in there, and then start weaving the end of the story. And then the story ended like this, which was very tragic, and displays that Joe character was guilty or not guilty, whatever you decide. Now what happens is that most of the time, if the examiner has asked you, tell me whether Joe Keller was guilty or not according to you, now they obviously write according to you, but what they want you to write is, yes, Joe Keller was guilty. Joe Keller was guilty. Why? Because he did this. They want you to act according to the play, not according to what you feel, even though they've written there that what do you feel about this, but still they would give you marks only if you act according to the play. If the play says Joe Keller was guilty, then you have to write that, yes, I too believe Joe Keller was guilty. If you do not write it, if you take it on words, take it by their words, they say that you have to give your own opinion, and you start giving your own opinion, that maybe, no, I think maybe Joe Keller was not guilty, maybe he wasn't guilty of so much, or it was a mistake, and then you would lose all the marks. So it's better to act according to the play. If the play says that Joe Keller was guilty, then you must believe that Joe Keller was guilty. Now moving on, there were feet. So the apple tree here, it is important. Larry is dead. This is important. A young woman, Anne, has come to visit the Kellers. Anne and Chris are in love. For sir, okay. From because in the opinion of Chris' mother, Kate, Anne is Larry's fiance. Kate believes that Larry is alive and would turn up any day. Right? So, Anne is the daughter of Steve Deaver. Yeah, this is again important. Anne is the daughter of Steve Deaver, business partner of Joe Keller, who owns a factory. He actually does not own the factory manufacturer. I don't know why they've written owns cylinder heads. I have no idea why they written he owns the factory, because the factory was obviously Joe Keller's. Maybe they had a kind of partnership and they jointly owned the factory. But the thing was, okay, we'll continue it with later. Let's go with own for now. So an urgent contract comes from the army to supply cylinder heads for aircraft. This is a kind of part. I don't know which part it is, but it's a kind of part for the aircraft. So they're saying to provide cylinder heads. Cylinder heads. Just a minute. But what happens is that cylinder heads for aircrafts to be used in war, but it so happens that the whole batch of cylinder heads produced by the manufacturing firm has developed cracks. Keller calls up Steve Deaver, asking him to weld the cracks on the cylinder heads and ship them off to the army. So uh, now this is not important. I don't think you should need mark it down, but if you want, then you will have to mark all of this up from here to here. You will have to note all of it down. But I think that I actually wrote all of these things in my notes. That's why my notes are so long. So even if you're a complete beginner, you don't know anything about the story, about the play, you haven't read any of the 3 units, if you read them through the notes, then you will understand at least 60 to 70% of the 3 units. Not 60 70, in fact 80% around 80% from the 3 units, if you just read those notes, because I've written those very detailed, in very details, right? But the thing is that you don't need to make such detailed notes, because there's no need for it. By the time you'll be done with the 3 units, you'll remember most of the things, and the notes would be just an unnecessary burden. Okay. So Keller calls up Steve Deaver, asking him to weld the cracks on the cylinder heads. Now I'm sure you all know what welding is, right? Welding. And then what happened? So, and shipped them off to the army. The damaged cylinder heads were passed by the factory and shipped out to the army, resulting in the death of 21 pilots. There was a court case against both Joe Keller, but this is sorry. This is still important here. There was a court case against Joe Keller and Steve Deaver. However, during the trial, Joe Keller denied his responsibility for the damaged cylinder heads. The court acquitted him while Steve Deaver was sent to jail. What is acquit? Acquit means free someone from a criminal charge by a verdict of not guilty. So officially freed him from criminal charges by announcing that he was not guilty. While Steve Deaver was sent to jail, where he is at the time the play opens. So when the play is going on, while the play opens, Steve Deaver is currently in jail. And this was the backstory. Frank Lube, one of Keller's neighbors, wants to know about N's father and inquires about his release on parole. Parole means the temporary or permanent release of a prisoner before the expiry of a sentence on the promise of good behavior. So before his actual sentence of or actual punishment term has expired, he is given a temporary or permanent release sometimes, if he has behaved, if he has had a good behavior in jail or during his term. So N wants to avoid such a question, obviously, since she is critical of her father after he was found guilty of fraud. N recollects that the neighborhood had described her father and her family members as murderers after her father was found guilty of causing the death of several aircraft pilots in the war on account of defective cylinder heads supplied by him to the army. I don't think there's any need for explanation here. It's obviously it's all very clear already. So even though Keller was acquitted by a higher court, acquit, I just told you what the meaning of acquit is, but again, free someone from a criminal charge by a verdict of not guilty. This is what acquit is. Even though Keller was acquitted by a higher court, the people of his locality still believed that Keller had got himself acquitted through underhand means. So he had used some kind of dark, shady, underhanded means. People believed it. So until now, we do not know whether Keller is guilty, whether he was not guilty. Oh, sorry, we do know. Actually, we do know, because they've already revealed that Keller himself had told Steve Deaver here. Keller calls up Steve Deaver and asks him to weld the cracks and ship them. So we know that Keller is guilty, but the other people and the family members do not know for sure that Keller is guilty. So Keller is of the opinion that N should write to her father explaining to him that during the war the conditions were difficult and no one knew what was actually happening. This is Joe Keller. So Joe Keller is of the opinion that N should write to her father and explain these things to him and get in touch with him again. N and her brother George are no longer in touch with their father Steve Deaver out of disgust and shame that he was involved in such a dreadful crime. Anne is surprised at the concern Joe Keller still has for her father and her family. She was under the impression, so Anne is surprised that Joe Keller still shows so much concern for her father and her family, because she thought that Keller would have a feeling of revenge and hatred towards Steve Dever, that is her father. Because her father, that is Steve Dever, had charged Keller of being involved in the supply of the defective cylinder heads, and had continued till the end of the sentence that he was actually involved in the crime and he was the real proprietor of this crime, not Steve Dever. So Keller says that he had forgiven her father and had no grievances against him. Grievance means complaint. In simplest language, grievance means a complaint. Anne is of the opinion that Larry died as a consequence of her father supplying defective cylinder heads to the army. So Anne believes that Larry's aircraft also crashed because it was also using the defective cylinder head which was provided by her own father. However, Joe Keller disagrees with her and says that Deaver was not responsible for Larry's death because that aeroplane Larry was flying did not have those cylinder heads, those damaged cylinder heads which were provided by their company, by their firm. Those cylinder heads were exclusively only for P-40 aeroplanes. And Larry was not flying a P-40 aeroplane, so he could not have the same cylinder, the same damaged cylinders. Giving an account of how the defective parts were supplied, Keller explains that this is Keller explaining to N. So Keller explains that urgent orders had come for supplying cylinder heads to the army. The trucks were already rushing to army depots with cylinders, but more orders were pouring in still. So Steve Dever came across a batch of cylinders that had tiny cracks. So Steve Dever found some damaged cylinders which had some tiny cracks in them, very small hairline cracks. So the breadth of a hair, very minute cracks. And this was also the reason why the army didn't see them, because they had to be checked through some machines or through some other instruments, and the army didn't go with it. Without thinking of the damage these cylinders could cause, he covered the cracks with his tools so that they would be accepted for use. Defending himself, Keller says that though Deaver was his partner in the firm, he was not told about the cracks in the cylinder heads, or else he could have saved such a disaster from happening by advising Deaver to withdraw that batch of cylinders. So he's saying that even though Steve Deaver was his partner, but Steve Deaver did not discuss about these things with Joe Keller, or else Joe Keller would have advised Deaver not to do such a thing. He defends Steve, but he still defends him because he knows obviously that he himself is guilty and Steve Deaver is not guilty. So he is trying to defend Steve out of his own guilt. Saying that he cannot be held guilty of murder, that Steve Deaver cannot be held guilty of murder because he had no intention of murdering anyone. In fact, he's trying to befool himself that I actually had no intention of murdering anyone, so I cannot be guilty of murder in any case. He's trying to soothe himself through Steve Deaver. So Joe Keller informs Anne that her brother George had called her from Columbus and wished to speak to her. George's trip to Columbus surprises Anne, as he had never gone all these years to meet his father. So Steve Deaver is being kept in a jail in Columbus, and George going to Columbus obviously means that he went there to meet their father. Keller is also suspicious. So Joe Keller is also suspicious of George's visit to his father Steve and Anne's visit to their home, because he tells Chris that Anne's father had been blaming him for the supply of defective cylinder heads to the army during the war, and then George suddenly went to Columbus to visit his father in jail. So what they're saying here is that Anne he tells Chris, so he is telling Chris now that N's father had been blaming him, so that N's father had blamed him for the supply of defective cylinder heads, and now George suddenly went to Columbus to meet his father in jail. So what does it mean? Keller is of the opinion that George must be wanting to reopen the whole case about the supply of defective cylinder heads so as to harm Keller. So Joe Keller thinks that George went to meet his father in Columbus to reopen this whole case so that he could push the blame on Keller and harm him. Both Joe Keller and Kate got worried and nervous about George's visit to the Keller household in order to meet N. So now George is coming to meet N, I guess where they were, Detroit, in Detroit, yeah. So George is coming to Detroit now to meet his sister N. N and George are sister and brothers, yeah. And Kate reminds Keller. Kate is Joe's wife, Joe Keller, the main character of this play. So Kate is his wife. She reminds Keller that George had become a liar and must have gone to meet his father in connection with the defective cylinder head's case. She warns him of George's visit and asks him to be alert and get ready for the worst situation he might have to face. This scene arouses suspicion in our minds that Keller has manipulated certain facts. Now, if they hadn't told us the backstory that Keller was actually guilty, up till now we wouldn't know that Keller was guilty or not guilty. So now, if you read this situation, if you read the play from here now, then you would start feeling that was Joe Keller guilty? Then why is afraid of reopening the case? And why are Joe Keller and Kate Keller so suspicious of George and so afraid of him? Are they really guilty or not guilty? Because we're reading it from the book, we already know that Joe Keller is guilty, but if you were reading the actual play until now, you wouldn't know whether he was guilty or not guilty. So it would be kind of mystery to you now. She warns him. The scene arouses suspicion in our minds that Keller has manipulated certain facts. Act 1 ends with the audience anticipating that some hidden secrets would be revealed with the arrival of George in Act 2. Anticipating means expecting. So now the Act 1 ends and the audience is expecting that some hidden secrets would now be revealed when George arrives in Act 2. In Act 2, the truth about Keller's role in the crime is finally revealed, increasing the dramatic tension. Act 2 begins in the evening of the very same day with Chris sawing the broken off apple tree and the family getting ready to go out for dinner. So Chris is cutting off that broken apple tree with a saw. Kate fears that Steve Deaver, who had alleged in the court till the last day of the trial that Keller had forced him to dispatch the defective cylinder heads to the army, might get the case reopened with George's help, thus putting them into trouble. Kate then urges Chris that he should help them if any difficulty arises. Obviously, as he is their son, he would definitely help them. But since Kate already knows of their crime, so she's still making sure that Chris helps them if any difficulty arises. They haven't told Chris actually yet that Joe Keller is guilty of this crime. They're just asking him that in case some kind of difficulty arises, Chris should be there to help them. Sue enters the scene asking N the reason why George was coming to the Keller household. So Sue is their neighbor. I guess she's Frank Lube's wife, maybe, or no, maybe the doctor's wife, Jim Bellis, whatever. So Sue enters the scene asking N the reason why George was coming to the Keller household. She guesses that his visit was to get Anne married off with Chris. So she has a guess that maybe he's coming to get Anne married off with Chris. Anne herself has no idea why her brother was coming. So Anne herself doesn't know why her brother is coming. Accusing Keller of being guilty like his partner Deaver, Sue says that Keller, being smart, got himself exonerated in the case by some trick. So now Sue is blaming Keller that he was also guilty, just like N's father. But because he was smart, he got himself exonerated. Exonerate means absolve someone from blame for a fault or wrongdoing. So he got himself out from this blame or his wrongdoing because he was smart. Otherwise, he would also be in jail or through some tricks. So N, however, objects to what Sue is saying because she believes that only her father, that is Steve Deaver, he is alone guilty of the defective arms case. To this, however, Sue replies that Keller is smart enough to make the people of the neighborhood believe that he is innocent. Then Sue says that Keller is very smart. He is smart enough that he can make the people of the neighborhood believe that I am innocent. N asks Chris whether his father Joe Keller is guilty. Now N is also suspicious, and then she starts asking Chris. There's a kind of suspicion in her heart now, so she asks Chris that whether Chris knows that his father is guilty or not guilty. Then Chris replies that his father is completely innocent and was falsely accused in the case. He had nothing to do with the case and he was falsely accused. The arrival of Ann's brother George helps in the further development of the plot and causes conflict between Joe Keller and his son Chris. George reveals the truth. Sorry, what is this happening? George reveals the truth about Joe Keller, accusing him of befooling and exploiting his father. So George reveals the truth now. Now, finally, the truth is revealed. It's not actually uh, means that George is still actually accusing. You can say he's still accusing. It's not completely proved that he is guilty or not guilty. It's not proved, but still, George is accusing him now. So it again creates a kind of suspicion in the minds of the reader that why is he bringing this up again after so many years? Is Joe Keller actually guilty in the end? So George reveals the truth about Joe Keller, accusing him. You cannot say reveals the truth. You can say accuses Joe Keller of befooling and exploiting his father. That is Steve Dever. Steve Dever was languishing in jail. Languish means be forced to remain in an unpleasant place or situation. So Steve Dever was languishing in jail because of Joe Keller. According to George, Steve Dever was informed by the foreman in his factory that the cylinder heads produced had some manufacturing defect. So George is saying that Steve Dever, that is George's father, was informed by some worker in the factory that the cylinder heads produced had some kind of manufacturing defect. And Steve Dever, upon knowing about this information, called up Keller to come to the factory immediately. And a large number of orders were coming from army authorities on an urgent basis, so they didn't have much time, obviously. Instead of coming to the factory now at this crucial point, Joe Keller asked him to weld the cylinder heads and ship them off to the army anyway. Keller said he had the flu and therefore was unable to come to the factory, but would take full responsibility in case some situation arises for the supply of the airplane parts. However, during the trial, Joe Keller denied his responsibility for the damaged cylinder heads, stabbing Steve Dever in the back. The court knew that Joe Keller was telling a lie. I don't know why the heck they have written this. They're saying that the court knew that Joe Keller was telling a lie, but in the appeal they believed Keller's story, acquitting him while sending Steve Dever to jail. So if the court already knew that Keller was saying a lie, so obviously the court must have believed it on basis of some proof or evidence or something like this. So why did they let Keller go? Why did they believe his story? I don't know why they've written this. It's completely messed up, but still we're going on with it. The thing is that even though Joe Keller lied, but he was acquitted due to some underhanded means or due to some tricks or for any case whatsoever. The thing is that he was acquitted by the court, while Steve Dever was sent to jail. George then accuses the Kellers to have taken away everything belonging to the Devers. He says that he will not allow Chris to marry his sister Anne and asks Anne to leave the place with him. After listening to George, Chris confronts his father to know whether he is the culprit. Now Chris is also getting suspicious. He doesn't know whether his father was guilty or not, but he is now suspicions is arousing inside Chris' brain. Now he confronts his father and asks him, "Tell me if you were guilty or not guilty." To justify his actions, Keller says that there were. Now Keller admits that, yeah, I was guilty, man. What will you do? Now Keller says that there were 120 defective cylinder heads in the factory, which he could not discard or he would have got bankrupt. He did not disclose to the army officials that he had in the store damaged cylinder heads. This would make him lose the contract and his business that had taken 40 years to build. So there were so many cylinder heads that discarding them would bring such a huge loss to his factory that he would have gone bankrupt. So there were so many mistakes, so many damaged cylinder heads that if he didn't find any way to ship them off, to sell them off, then he would be in such a debt that his company would go bankrupt. So to save himself from this, he just welded the. He gave orders to weld the cylinder heads and ship them off anyway. To avoid such a situation, he supplied the defective cylinder heads to the army, confident that the army officials would check the engines before installing them to the aircraft. Keller further says that he was sure that the army authorities would send him a report after checking the engines. But by the time he decided to inform them about the cracks in the cylinder heads, the damage had already been done. So by the time his guilty conscience decided to tell the army authorities that the cylinders were actually damaged and they should not use it. The damage had already been done. The newspaper headlines read that 21 aeroplanes had crashed and the pilots had been killed. The military officers came to his factory to arrest him, and he denied the charges, keeping in mind his son Chris's future. Keller says if he had let his business to collapse, he would not have been in a position to set up another business at the age of 61. Chris gets furious at this. He accuses Keller of killing his own countrymen. He was worse than an animal. No animal kills his own. Chris says that he does not know how to punish Joe. He cries out, "What must I do, Jesus God? What must I do?" And Keller says, "Chris, my Chris." Both of them seem to be helpless and feel miserable. The play reaches its climax in Act 3. So, Act 1 was about the background story of what happened, who was Steve Deaver, who was Joe Keller, what kind of relationship they had, what was the relation between Chris Keller and Ann Deaver, right? So, Act 1 was basically describing the relationships between each other, the characters, and their past story. It was actually formulating a basic plot, a basic structure. It was weaving a basic structure of the play. Act 1 was about this. Then Act 2 was about the confrontation. The Act 2 was about the confrontation. Tongue twister. It was about a confrontation about between George between George Deaver and Joe Keller, and between then Joe Keller and his son Chris Keller. So Act 2 was about revealing the truth, what the truth is. And then Act 3 is the climax. Act 3 is about what happens after we know the truth. Now the truth is bare before you. So what will happen now? What will be the consequences of knowing the truth? What are the effects? What will happen now that the truth is bared before the audience, for the people? Now the truth is in the open. So what consequences will it lead to? Act 3 opens with Kate rocking impatiently in her chair, waiting for Chris to return home after he disappeared from the house. So, after the confrontation with his father, Chris goes off to drive his Lamborghini. Just joking, there was no Lamborghini, I guess, at that time. Maybe if there was, they weren't able to afford it. But the thing is that George went out for a drive after confronting his father and after this heavy argument, which is not given in the book, but which you can read in the actual play. Kate wants Keller to apprise Chris of the whole situation. Now, what is apprise? Inform or tell someone. So, Kate wants Keller to tell Chris of the whole situation that had happened back then, admitting his mistake once he came back, and that he should also admit his mistake to Keller or to Chris. Chris felt happy. Kate suggests to him to tell Chris that he is ready to go to prison, so that Chris felt happy that his father was willing to repent. So Kate also suggests to Kate also suggests to Joe that he should tell Chris that he is ready to go to prison and he is actually guilty, feeling guilty of his crime, and he wants to repent for his crime. So she says that Chris will feel happy about this, that finally his father is at least willing to repent. According to Kate, Chris would not let Joe go to prison, but would rather forgive him. So he says that once Chris knows that his father is feeling guilty of his crimes, he would not let him go to jail, and in fact, rather lovingly forgive him, happily forgive him. Keller does not agree with her, as he feels he had done everything for his family's sake. Keller, up to this point, does not feel that he has done something wrong or something for his personal gains or something that is immoral. He believes that he did all this for his own family, and killing some other people for his own family was a fair deal. No big problem about it. I guess he was stuck in the head somewhere. Kate says that for Chris there is something bigger than one's family, and that Keller had broken Chris's heart. Kate wants Anne to leave the very next morning, and now Kate also wants Anne to leave the next morning without Chris, and is firm on her belief that her son Larry is still alive. Anne tries hard to make Kate believe that Larry was dead. Now, Anne is trying hard to make Kate believe that Larry was dead, and therefore she cannot marry Larry, and speaks about Larry's aeroplane crash on the coast of China on the 25th of November. Anne points out that his plane had not crashed due to engine failure. Kate refuses to believe her. Their future union of Chris and N in marriage is threatened by Kate, and in order to save their marriage, Anne takes out a letter from her pocket which she had brought as a proof that Larry is dead, and then shows it to Kate. Now, why didn't she show it before? Because she didn't want to break the poor woman's heart. She didn't want to break her belief that Larry was still alive. But now, because it has come to a point where she is resolute, absolute, that she would not let Anne marry Chris because Larry is still alive. So she needs to show her the proof that no, Larry is dead. Therefore, I can marry Chris now. And with her wish. After reading the letter that explains the motive of Larry's suicide, Kate is not shocked, for she has always known deep inside, while constantly denying, that Larry had died in the war. So, uh, unable to accept the death of her son, she had lived in self deception that he was still alive and would come back home someday. What is self deception? The action or practice of allowing oneself to believe that a false or unvalidated feeling is true. This is self deception. So sometimes you let yourself believe that no, no, this cannot happen, this cannot be, he's telling a lie, or this is not the truth, like something like this. You let yourself go to the wrong unvalidated theory that no, this is not true. You let yourself be taken away towards the wrong facts just to deny the reality. So this is what Kate was doing. She was in a situation of self deception where she was still thinking that Larry was alive and he would come back one day, but no, obviously he wouldn't. Chris, who had gone out, comes back after driving around, just like I told you. He went off for a drive. Chris informs his mother that he is leaving home alone for good, and that he is going to Cleveland, where he gets hopes to get a job in a private firm. So basically, he's saying that he will not run his father's business. I will make my own business in a private firm. Then I will be as rich as Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. Just kidding. Anne wants to leave with Chris, but he refuses to take her along. Why refuses to take her along? This is more explained in the actual play itself. But you would also know the reason, I guess, maybe in unit 3 or unit 4, because the unit 3 and unit 4 actually are basically about the same thing over and over again. They're repeating the story over and over and over and over and again, just adding some 2 3 extra facts in between, just to make it look like, yeah, we've added something new. So if they had compiled all of it in one act, I would have been greatly really thankful for them. But obviously, what can we expect from a government university? Defending himself is, where were we? N wants to leave with Chris, but he refuses to take her along. Meanwhile, Keller appears on the scene to talk to Chris. Now, Joe Keller, come on the scene to talk to Chris. Now it has become clear to him that both his wife and his son want him to go to jail. Keller asks Chris if he wanted him to fail. He further says that during wartime, everybody sold their manufactured goods to the government against money. Defending himself, he says that everyone tries to make money by all possible methods. Chris says that he had idolized his father, but the latter proved himself to be unworthy. In order to show the letter to Chris, now Chris doesn't know a heck about the letter, but N now snatches the letter from Kate to give it to Chris to read. Chris reads the contents of the letter and tells his father that Larry had deliberately killed himself in a crash. He further says that Larry was very upset about his father's involvement in the death of his fellow pilots. Larry intentionally, on purpose, crashed his aeroplane when it became unbearable for him to live with the shame and guilt. He had further written that if he had been there at the time of his father's conviction in the court, trial or conviction, both same thing basically, he would have killed him. After reading the letter, Chris tells his father that he should know what is to be done now. Obviously, not kill himself. Keller asks Chris to get the car ready and drive him to the police where he will surrender himself. So now he's finally feeling a guilty, having a guilty conscience. He believes that he should go to jail. Obviously, he doesn't believe he should go to jail yet. But this is a spoiler, so I won't tell you. So what happens is that Kate prevents him from surrendering to the police, saying that Larry would not have wanted him to surrender. Keller says that in Larry's opinion, the other pilots were also like his sons, and so he has to pay the penalty. Added, this is written added here, it's wrong. Kate pleads with Chris not to take his father to jail as she fears that he will die in there, he will die in prison. She reminds Chris that the war is over and the letter has no meaning anymore. So what's the point of sending another person, another of his family member to jail when the war is already long over? What's the point of this? Why bring more unhappiness to the family? Oh no. Chris disagrees with her. Keller goes inside the house and a shot is heard from inside the house. Damn, he was a real man. He was true to his words because he said that if there is something bigger to Chris than this father-son relationship, then I would put a bullet in my head. Well, he had promised this, and now he comes up to his promise. He was a real man. I got to admit it. So Chris enters the house and has no idea that his father had shot himself. Obviously, he heard a shot, but he thought that maybe my father was shooting the birds outside. He has this kind of hobby. He has no idea that his father shot himself. Maybe he tried to shoot something else. Maybe the mirror. Maybe he tried shooting practice at his room. So Chris comes out inconsolable. Inconsolable means in a very deep grief that is not comforted, that is not being able to be comforted. So he comes out inconsolable after seeing his father dead. My God, he realizes after seeing his father's body that he had shot himself. Oh shit, what did he do? Kate knows very well. Obviously, Kate was smart, so she knew very well that her husband had committed suicide to pay for the penalty of his crime. She tells Chris, "Don't feel guilty, man. Come on, he had to do this. He was guilty of his crimes. Don't feel guilty. What if your father died? What if you commit suicide? Why are you feeling guilty? And let's forget the past and live a new life. Come on, let's chill, enjoy. Let's go on the beach, enjoy, chill. Let's have a new life. Forget about Keller, Joe Keller. Who was he? He died. End. So the play ends with a tragic scene and running to look for Dr. Bayliss and Chris and Kate chilling and enjoying over their father's body. Kidding. Chris and Kate are left alone grieving for Joe Keller. The play ends with Chris facing with horror his own complicity. The complicity means the fact or condition of being involved with others in an activity that is unlawful or morally wrong. So Chris Keller believes that it was his involvement in his father's self-destruction, that it was Chris that led to his father's self-destruction. And with Keller's death, the play forcefully repudiates antisocial behavior. So repudiates means rejects. So with Keller's death, the play now forcefully rejects antisocial behavior that comes derives means comes that comes from the myth of privatism in American society. So there's a myth in the in private, but the privatism means privatism is a form of is a system in which everyone was after money, after making money. So basically, what the American theory was, what the American mindset was, that you should quickly become successful, make a lot of money, and making a lot of money was the actual ideal notion of being successful. That the more rich you are, the more successful you are, and that you should get start making money and try all kinds of means to make money or to get rich in order to be successful. So this was basically the American ideal notion of success, and they believed in antisocial behavior, that you will have to be antisocial if you wish to be successful, if you wish to be rich. So this play forcefully rejects this antisocial behavior that comes from the myth of privatism. So privatism was not about only making money. This was a wrong notion. Privatism was not only about making money. The minor characters in the play, such as Dr. Jim Bayliss, his wife Sue, Bert, Frank, Lube, and Lydia, contribute to the unity of plot with their dialogues, enhancing the play's realism. Their dialogues contribute to the routine activities of daily life, such as the damage caused to the trees that were snapped by the fierce wind, the weather forecast in the newspaper. So, if you see a superhero movie, or if you see a cool movie or some kind of such movie, will you actually expect to see dialogues like, "Yeah, man, the weather's nice. Let's go for a walk. Oh, have you had dinner? What did you have for dinner today? Oh, how did you prepare it? Did you add enough salt?" Or you wouldn't hear such day-to-day normal dialogues like, "Mom, please pass me some salt," or "Please add this while making this food," or "I'm going out for some walk after dinner." So these are the actual real day-to-day life, real life dialogues that we use in our daily life, right? So the poor remuneration which the doctor gets as compared to film star remuneration means money paid for a work or service. A toaster that is out of order. You don't talk about a toaster that is out of order in a heroic, in a melodramatic film, or in a melodramatic story. You don't talk about it. But in a realism, in a realistic story, yeah, these dialogues are there because we actually use this dialogue daily, almost daily, in our normal everyday life. The banalities of conversation. Banality means lacking in originality, so as to be obvious and boring. These talks are now very obvious talks and boring talks, right? Because we are having these talks every day, so they do not arouse any kind of interest in us. These are very boring talks. But these boring talks are a part of our daily life, and that's why they contribute very heavily to making it a realistic play. So the banalities of conversation bring interest to the plot, giving it a realistic effect without disturbing the progress of the main plot. Now I'm really sorry because I didn't. Alright, I forgot to actually make the notes in here because I'm actually feeling very drunk. Whenever I'm deeply involved in teaching or studying, I feel like I'm a drunkard. So, for damage, the court acquitted while Frank Levin of Kyle was to know of the father and family members of murder. Guilty even though Kyle was acquitted by him, the principal. Now, this is important here. Here. Now, you can just cut it off here. Instead of she, you can write N. N is critical. Save. Now, if you want, I can even provide these PDFs where the notes are already there along with these other notes. So I'm calling both of them notes. So these green notes and these small sticky notes are both in there. So if you want, I can provide these PDFs in the descriptions. But if you don't want, who cares? Kelly's of the opinion and should write the father. Anne is surprised, yeah. She was under Kelly would have feeling of towards her father. Okay, up to here. Then yeah, this is also important. Now N believed up to here. Uh, Larry's death. Joe Keller disagrees with her. Why? Because Larry was flying and not used the cylinder. The aeroplane, sorry, the aeroplane Larry was flying had not used the cylinder. This is very important. This P-40 aeroplane. So I'll mark it again. I'm gonna mark it. Yeah, I'm gonna mark it 2 times here. See, I'm gonna mark it 3 times just to tell you how important this is. No, it's actually very unimportant, but it tells you to remember the very basic information, the very what do we say, minute information, travel matters, or of anything that you're reading. Giving an account of how the effective powers of France, Steve Deaver came across without thinking. Though Deaver was a partner, he was not all. He would have. He defends Steve saying Joe Keller let her brother a car from Columbus, Georgia to Columbus, surprises his father. He tells President and father, Keller's of the opinion George was me. Did George only went to blame George. Now, this Sue enters. So Sue. Now, this can also be used somewhere in some kind of questions depicting that did the neighbors believe that Keller was innocent? So you can use this line that no, the neighbors did not believe in the innocence of Joe Keller, and this is the proof that one of the neighbors is saying such a thing. My God, backstabber! She's talking about him behind his back. And ask Chris whether his father Joe Keller is guilty, to which Chris replies that the father is completely. Oh my God, no, Chris doesn't know. He doesn't have an idea. What a poor innocent child. Obviously, he vaguely knows about it. Uh, George reveals the truth about accusing him of falling, and Steve Degas languishing there because of Steve Degas, the foreman. So if you want, you can uh, mark everything down to here. Mark everything down from here to this point where this blue marker is, up to here, if you wish to. But to me, I don't think it would be important. But still, Jose and accused the cases were taken away from him. Now, to justify his actions, he did not disclose Ronaldo and his business related to about that he had been killed. Now, this whole thing can be important. I'm not telling you to make a note of it. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm just telling you that it would be better if you read this one properly, or this, and if you remember this part, because this part actually tells about if there was a question that how did Keller justify his actions, or what was the truth behind Keller's crime, or why did Keller commit such a crime. If there was similar questions, you can use this part. So I'll still highlight this part. You don't need to make a note of it, but just in case, just remember to read this part better. Chris gets furious. Kate wants Keller. Forgive him. Now he is again defending himself from here to here, so I'll mark this down too. Chris reads the contents of the letter. Now this is important because we don't know previously what the content of the letter says. So this is especially important because until now we had no idea what the contents of the letter said. This is the first time the contents of the letters are revealed to us. The letter. So now Keller is finally feeling guilty. My God, this is such a dramatic, sorry, emotional. This is such an emotional scene. Keller is finally feeling guilty. I'm about to cry. Okay. Chris, not to take his father to jail, she reminds Chris that the war disagrees. Keller goes inside the house and it shows her. This whole part is critically important. Sorry, what was it again? I didn't want to copy it, man. Just highlight it. Ends with Chris facing these lines in American society. These lines are exceptionally, critically, superbly important. This last part, this last box here is superbly important. So remember to wait. What is this? Uh, Sorry. Here. Yeah, now it's fine. If you wish to know which ebook reader or PDF reader I'm using, then you should subscribe to my YouTube channel for a monthly payment of $10 only. Just kidding. The PDF reader I'm using is Moon Plus Reader. Sometimes I also use Adobe Acrobat Reader. It has an exceptionally intelligent and easy to use interface, a reading mode basically in Adobe Acrobat Reader. But this Moon Plus Reader basically gives me all the tools necessary, that all the tools that I find necessary, all the tools that are required to me. Wait, again, this is a bit. I need to again change it. Yeah, right. So Arthur Miller on drama as tragedy. Do these need to be deleted? I guess we can cover them up here. So Arthur Miller on drama as a tragedy. In his essay Tragedy and Common Man, Miller says that there were very few modern tragedies written because people thought that they were fit only for the very highly placed, the kings or the kingly. That there were. So Miller believed that the tragedies written were very less because people believed that tragedies were to be written only for the kings or the best of the people, the upper classmen. uh, as Aristotle believed. Aristotle also believed in this thing. For Aristotle, in a tragic play, the protagonist should be king or someone of high class, so that his change in fortune from good to bad can be represented on a very big scale. Now, Arthur Miller challenged this belief. Obviously, Arthur Miller could challenge this belief because in Aristotle's time, people were not so educated or not so involved with the daily life. They were not, you can say, not intelligent. The word is not intelligent. They were not so wise, you can say. Wise in certain sense, but not about this. So the people, it would have been very obvious to the people if the protagonist was someone of a very high class or very insurmountable, sorry, not insurmountable, am I saying, of he had amassed huge fortunes, because people were basically very simple and simple minded people. So if they saw someone with very great, with very big fortunes, and they would say, oh my god, this man is powerful, this man has basically everything. And then he would see the sad side of the tragic side of that person, him losing all his fortunes. Or let's say he didn't lose all his fortune, but he lost his daughter, his friend, his family, or people important to him. Then he would see the tragic side of the person, and then they would realize that despite having such fortunes, the person is living such a tragic life. It would have had a deep impact on the life, on the minds of the people of that time. But now people were basically living a comfortable life. Everyone was living basically a comfortable life. There was not such a big distinction between the poor people and the rich people, because there was now a convention of a middle class. A middle class had emerged now. So basically, there were a lot of people who were living a comfortable life, not a lavish life. There were most of the people who were living a comfortable life. So they did not knew about. So they didn't care about what the super rich or what the high, what the actual rich people did. If they could make a fortune in their life, if they could have a better life than they had now, it would be enough for them. They didn't actually care about being the super rich or being the ultra rich people, right? Because during Aristotle's time, most people were either poor or very rich. There wasn't a middle class society. There was a concept, a convention of a middle class society. It was either rich, either super rich, or either very poor. There were only two kinds of people during that time, mostly. There were or you can say that the population of middle class people were not as high as it is in today's time. So Arthur Miller challenged this belief previously accepted about tragic plays, saying that tragic consciousness existed even in the ordinary people. Obviously, in his time, it existed in the ordinary people because there was a class of middle class society. For him, the tragic feeling is evoked in us when we are in the presence of a character who is ready to lay down his life, if need be, to secure one thing, his sense of personal dignity. So for him, the tragic feeling comes inside us when we are in the presence of a character who is ready to lay down everything, in even his life, if it is needed, to secure just one thing, to get that one thing, which is a sense of personal pride, a sense of personal dignity. So for his pride, for his dignity, he is ready to sacrifice everything that is dear to him. And this is the actual tragedy of the play, that a person is willing to give up everything just to maintain his dignity, just to have a sense of pride. This is what the actual tragedy is about. Arthur Miller believed that the common man is as apt a subject for tragedy in its highest sense as kings were. So Arthur Miller believed that in the highest sense of tragedy, even a common man is as apt means appropriate or suitable, as any king could ever be. Miller emphasized that main characters in a tragedy should be ordinary people in domestic surroundings to whom the audience can easily relate. That, yeah, this person is similar to me. Obviously, I have a tragic life too. Come on, man. Let's focus on my tragic life and show it to other people. Just kidding. So, what he says that other people can readily relate to him. So that's what the tragic story should be based on. It should be based on ordinary people with ordinary surroundings. The audience's understanding of a tragic play becomes easy with ordinary people playing the main role. A play having a great person as protagonist would involve elevated language, high class language, understood only by the upper class people, while the common man would be unable to comprehend the meaning of the play. According to Miller, tragedy is the consequence of a man's total compulsion to evaluate himself justly. Now, I know this might sound a bit complicated, so let's break it up and make it easy to understand. So, according to Miller, tragedy is the consequence, is the end result, is the result of a man's total compulsion. Compulsion means the act or state of forcing or being forced to do something. So, tragedy is the consequence of a man's total compulsion to evaluate himself justly. So, his total force. So, he is forcing himself completely so that he can be evaluated justly. So that he can be evaluated. Now, if you don't know the meaning of evaluated, let's first check. Because I don't know the exact meaning of evaluated. I know what it means, but not the actual word used to describe it. So raised above the ground. Elevated. Wait. What? It was elevated? I thought it was evaluated. Oh, sorry, where were we? Yeah, here. Elevate. No, I actually wrote here. Here, it's evaluate here. So estimate or determine the nature, value, quality, or form a critical opinion of. Form a critical opinion of himself justly. So this is basically again the same, so that he could feel a sense of pride in himself. So tragedy. So a man is ready to give everything up. A man is ready to force. I mean, so they're saying that a sense of personal dignity, a sense of a sense that he needs to justify himself, or evaluate himself in a just manner, forces him to give up everything, forces him to uh, give everything that he has, uh, forces him to try his hardest so that he can be evaluated justly, so that he can evaluate himself. He can rise up in his own eyes. You can say कि अपनी आंखों में ऊंचा दिखना. He can rise in his own sense, in his own eyes, to a greater length. The tragic flaw is not exclusively in grand or elevated characters, it is also present in ordinary people. Now, obviously, tragedy comes because that main character has some kind of tragic flaw. Just like Oedipus Rex had. Oedipus Rex had what? It was a tragic play. Why? Because it was such a perfect character. Oedipus. I actually go on saying it Oedipus. Oedipus. So what happens is that Oedipus Rex. Rex means king. So basically his name was Oedipus, not Oedipus Rex. The name of the play is Oedipus Rex. So what happens is Oedipus is such a perfect man that he cannot see that he does not believe that he can actually have some kind of flaw in himself, that he could have done such a heinous crime of killing his own father and marrying his own mother, whatever the shit was. So he was such a perfect man in his own eyes, but he had this tragic flaw that even unknowingly, even without his own knowledge, he did this thing. And this was the tragic flaw of the tragedy, of the tragic play. This was his tragic flaw, and this is what led to the tragedy of the play. Now, a man so perfect, a man of such combination that he had everything, the looks, the brains, the everything that can be desirable in a man, but he went on to do such a heinous, such a horrible crime. This is what made the play a cruel tragedy, or maybe made the play tragic, whatever. So, the flaw or crack in the character is his unwillingness to remain passive over what he conceives to be a challenge to his dignity, accepting or allowing what happens or what others do. So, it is his unwillingness to remain passive of what he conceives to be a challenge. So, it is his unwillingness because he of to remain. So, or to remain. So he does not allow it to happen. Unwillingness, he is unwilling to remain passive, means accepting or allowing what happens or what others do. He is unwilling to allow of what he conceives to be a challenge to his dignity, his image, of his rightful status. So basically what he's saying is using intricate, especially complicated bullshit words to make some simple a very simple text sound high class, or you can say what was the word he used there? The tragic flaw, elevated. He's using elevated language. I guess the book is using elevated language to make some simple things look very difficult and complicated. So what he's saying that he does not stand by when his own dignity is being harmed. So the what makes the play tragic is that the person or the character wants to justify himself to the world. He wants to justify himself to himself. He wants to rise up in his eye. He does not let anything bring a flaw. He does not let anything hit his dignity, hit his pride. He wants to live his life with full of dignity, with full of pride, and he does not let anything stand in its way. He's ready to give up everything to maintain this dignity, to maintain this pride. And this is how any tragic or every tragic play is about. It's about the man fighting against all odds to maintain his dignity, giving up everything to maintain that little flask of pride that he has. Arthur Miller wrote tragic plays such as The Crucible, All My Sons, and The Death of a Salesman. In fact, so what means is that a tragic play comes when there is a person who is ready to give up everything for personal gain, personal honor, personal valor, or personal pride. That is why I guess, in a sense, you can say that the Iliad, as though the Iliad has not been classified specifically as a tragic play, but still it has lots of tragic parts. Just like who was that? Achilles. Achilles was a very proud person and he was ready to give up everything for his pride. Now, this is a tragic play. Come on, man. This is such a tragic play. But he fights, and for his pride alone, he refuses to fight a war for Agamemnon, which was his king. Right? He refuses to fight a war for Agamemnon, who was his king, because his own pride was hurt. Right? I won't go into detailed story about it because you should remember it, because it was only last year. So you should remember the story of the Iliad. But when his friend is hurt, what was the name of his friend? I'm sorry, Patroclus, I guess, yeah. Patroclus. When Patroclus is slain by Hector, so he goes to war despite the harm to his own pride. So yeah, basically you can say that this was not a complete tragic story, because Achilles was not ready to give everything for his pride. When his emotions were when his friend was slain, he went on to fight in the war. Right? If he was such a tragic character, if he was a tragic character perfect for a tragic play, then he would not go to fight in the war no matter what happens, because he was there, because he would have maintained his dignity. That if Agamemnon does not give me my rightful share of the war booty, that is this girl, then I would not go fight in the war. No, he was not a simp, but still, his pride is a pride, man. What can I say about it? After all, he was such a legendary warrior. His tragedies were first associated with the Americans' belief of a certain form of idealism that man is the captain of his fate. One such tragedy was All My Sons, which was about the high significance of Joe Keller and the resulting actions and consequences. His actions led to his downfall, making him a tragic character in the play A Modern Tragedy. So what they say, that the Americans believe that in idealism, the man is the captain of his own fate. So man controls his own fate through his own actions, and this is what he shows, that Joe Keller, it was not like it came out of nowhere. That George came out of nowhere to just reopen the case about it, and then George came out of nowhere to reopen the case, and then Joe Keller just shot him out of nowhere. It was all interwoven with each other. There were actions which led to certain consequences and certain results. Right. So these actions arose because of what Joe Keller had did in the past. So Joe Keller was basically the captain of his own fate, that is his own death or committing suicide. I'm not making maybe a lot of sense, but still I guess you got the idea. His actions led to his downfall. Yeah, the basic thing is that his own actions led to his downfall. There was nothing else to it. It wasn't like he was wrongly accused out of nowhere. Like he was a very good he was a good citizen minding his own business, suddenly comes out of nowhere and throws a stupid case at him that, oh my god, man, I saw you doing this shit, and then he suddenly goes to jail. No, this was not the thing. He did something for which he faced the consequences. It was not like he was minding his own business and just fate decides to throw a challenge at him, or fate decides to throw a case at him, and then he's suddenly involved in all of this trial and about the play. He was involved in this from the start. Uh, he was the main proprietor of it, and he was the reason why the case actually started, why all of this while all of this thing while all of this tragedy actually started. He was the main progenitor of it, and because of his actions, there were these consequences that led to his suicide, that led to his death. So he was responsible for them at the very end. All My Sons, a Tragedy. The play All My Sons deals with the fate of Joe Keller. Though uneducated and a self-made man, Keller has committed an atrocious means horrifyingly wicked, act during World War II. So this play is about World War II. Now, I highly recommend that you read All My Sons, a Tragedy, this part completely, because it's very important. It gives a a very good overview about what the things were, or what some of the things that we missed previously. So I highly advise you to read All My Sons of Tragedy 2.4, this one completely and in detail. So, though uneducated and a self-made man, Keller has committed an atrocious means horrifyingly wicked act during World War II. Joe Keller and Steve Deaver are partners of a factory that manufactures cylinder heads for aircraft. During the war, they get a contract from the army for supplying them cylinder heads on an urgent basis. Steve Deaver is informed by the foreman in his factory that the cylinder heads that were produced had hairline cracks in them. So they were such small that they were of the breadth of a hair. Or we can actually check the meaning of hairline cracks, right? If you do not believe me, obviously none of you believe me. A very thin line, the natural margin formed by hair on the head. See? So they were such little small cracks. Steve Deaver calls up Keller to come to the factory immediately. Keller says that no man, I wouldn't come. I don't listen to you. I'm the boss here. So Keller says that he would be unable to go to the factory as he was down with the flu. Gosh, I found reasonable excuse. Asking him to weld the cylinder heads, he assures Deaver that he would take full responsibility for the damaged cylinder heads. Yeah, of course, if there's an official inquiry on it, if the police comes to fetch you, I'll just jump in front of you like a Superman, say, oh man, I did this. How dare you take Steve Deaver to jail? And of course, the innocent, gullible Steve Deaver believed it. Yeah, Keller is my best mate, man. He will take my side. So Steve Devers welds up the cylinder heads and then shipped them off to the army, believing in Joe Keller because he was such an idiot. He deserved to go to jail. So these damaged cylinder heads caused 21 planes to crash, killing their pilots. Both Deaver and Keller are arrested and convicted, but at the trial, Joe Keller denies responsibility and is exonerated as the blame shifts to Steve Deaver, who is imprisoned. Exonerated. I've already told you what exonerated is, but I will tell you one more time what exonerated it. Well, let me search for it myself first, because I even myself don't remember what exonerated was. But exonerated was to leave him out, like officially, to let him go. Okay. Now don't mind these small little sounds that come in between, because my nose is not happy today. My nose is blocked. So, anyways, where were we? Moving on. Where was exonerated? Where was it? Here, exonerated. It is freed from any question of guilt. Pronounced not guilty of criminal charges. This is very easy actually. So what will happen? Let's say your friend calls you that, come on man, if that person is having some kind of enmity with you, you just go and murder him. I'll take the full responsibility. What will you say? Oh man, I believe you. I'm gonna go and kill that bastard, and then you'll take the full responsibility of it. Yeah, I'll believe you. I'll tell the police that you did the murder, and then you just go up there and say, yeah, I'm the convict. Come on, catch me. No, of course you'd deny it. You'd say, "Come on, man. Do you think I'm an idiot? I'm gonna murder that person, and then you're gonna take the responsibility for the crime?" No, of course you wouldn't. So any sane person would do it, but I don't know why Steve Deaver, maybe Steve Deaver and Joe Keller were gay brothers. But so what? They actually believed in. So Steve Deaver basically believed in Joe Keller, and for this reason, he shipped them off after welding them up. The main action in the play revolves around this tragic incident. The ostensible harmony of the house is disturbed. What is ostensible? Stated or appearing to be true, but not necessarily so. So it appeared that the house was in a harmony, but it wasn't actually. It wasn't so. But so the ostensible harmony of the house is disturbed 3 years later with Anne's arrival to the Keller household in order to marry Chris Keller. Situation in the Keller home worsens with the arrival of George. Steve Deaver's son and Anne's brother, who comes to prevent Anne's marriage with Chris. Kate believes Larry to be still alive, though he had gone missing in action during the war. It is this belief of hers that enables her for 3 years to support her husband Joe Keller and be a partner in his crime by concealing her knowledge of the case. So yeah, they were like partners in crime. Come on, let's shoot, kill. We'll be partners in crime, like not Mr. Incredible and Miss and who was that Elastic Girl. Yeah, they weren't like that. They were like Baba Ram Rahim and Honeypreet. I guess that would suit them better. But sorry, we're not gonna take this to that length. So the play is basically a tragic play. You're trying to make it sound funny. So Kate believes Larry to be still alive. It is this belief of her. George reveals the truth that Keller was the main culprit, responsible for the death of 21 pilots, and because of him, his father in jail. When confronted by Chris to know whether his father was guilty, Keller justifies his actions, saying that he took the decision to ship faulty cylinder heads to the army to preserve his business and for the welfare of his family. So, what will you do about it? What did I do wrong? Come on, man, I did it for my family. This justifies everything. Joe Keller pursues the American dream of owning materialistic wealth. Yeah, this was the American dream. Okay, you can mark it down. Joe Keller. So so this was the American dream. American dream during Arthur Miller's time. Not nowadays. Maybe still nowadays somewhat. Now it has become actually a world dream, not American dream. It has become an international dream, man. We're dreaming even while waking up. So basically it was an American dream. Americans were crazy about this thing during Arthur Miller's time, about owning materialistic wealth. Why this was? Because they had just gotten out of the Great Depression. The Great Depression had showed them how financially weak they were and how important assets were, how important wealth, how important materialistic things were. The Great Depression had shown the Americans this in its raw sense. So they were crazy about pursuing materialistic wealth. A nice home, good job, financial security, car, whatever you can expect. And maybe they wanted a private jet too. But he has not written it here. All are done for the sake of the family. Keller says, Chris, I did it for you. It was a chance and I took it for you. I'm 61 years old. When would I have another chance to make something for you? 61 years old, you don't get another chance, do ya? Kate Keller supports her husband's guilt by concealing her knowledge of the terrible crime he had committed, fearing that it might break the family unit. It is also ironic that Keller's decision to act. If you still don't know what irony is, I advise you to quit English honors and take some other course. I'm not going to explain irony. I know some of you might not know what irony is, but then I advise you to check it up right now. That Keller's decision to act for his son and his family is the cause of estrangement between him and Chris. Estrangement means the fact of no longer being on friendly terms. So they had a kind of like, me and my father are on estrangement right now, I'll be honest. So in the same way, Chris and his father was had a kind of estrangement between them. They were no longer on friendly terms, very formal. Keller's myopic worldview disallows him to see beyond his family, like I told previously. His claim that there is nothing bigger than his family cuts him off from any kind of relationship which he could have with the society, which is wrong. The view on morality of both Chris and Larry Keller are a contrast to those of his parents. Chris is disgusted when his father tries to justify his act, saying, "For me, I was dying every day, and you were killing my boys, and you did it for me? What the hell do you think I was thinking of? The goddamn business? Don't you have a country? Don't you live in the world? You don't even an animal. No animal kills his own. What are you?" Larry's letter to Anne reveals that, shamed by his father's involvement in fraud and profiteering, Larry is compelled to destroy himself deliberately. It is a devastating irony that Joe's attempt to work for the interest of the family actually led to the collapse of his family, results in fraud and the deaths of 21 pilots. The clash between the ideals of father and his son finally results in the suicide of Joe Keller. Denial on the part of most of the character of the play also contributes towards making the play a tragedy. Joe Keller, the chief character himself, lied to everybody, including his family, that he was not involved in supplying defective cylinder heads. Ellie's denial in the court, despite the assurance given by him to his partner Steve Deaver at the time of the shipment, landed Deaver in jail. I don't know what they're saying. Ellie's denial? Who is Ellie? Ellie's denial in the court, despite the assurance given by him to his partner Steve Deaver. So maybe you can say his denial, his or Keller's, Joe's denial. So Joe has assured his partner Steve that, man, I'll be there for you, but still he denied. Damn, what a backstabber. To save her husband from going to jail, Kate herself lives in denial and self deception. She firmly believes that Larry is alive despite the knowledge of his death because she knows that Larry's suicide is the result of her husband's crime of killing the pilots. So she already knew about it, but still she denied it because then it would mean accepting the fact that Joe Keller actually did such a horrible crime and killed those 21 pilots and, in fact, indirectly killed his own son. Her belief that Larry is alive is beneficial for the peace and harmony in the family. Chris has a vague idea of his father's crime, but is unable to accept him as a criminal as he had always looked up to his father and idolized him. Oh gosh. And herself chose to deny the truth for 3 years only to save her relationship with Chris. The facts of the case that Keller had manipulated to prove himself clean was also known to the neighbors, but they too pretended that he was horiest. Oh no, he was what, horiest? Honest, sorry, that he was honest, and they accepted him back into their social life. In spite of being uneducated, Joe Keller is a hardworking person and a successful businessman, an honest worker and a friendly and polite person. He likes to socialize with everyone, but he has a flaw or weakness that is absolutely necessary to make it a tragic play. Like we discussed before, that the main character must have a tragic flaw or a weakness. This in turn causes him to act wrongly. His tragic decision to ship defective slender heads that killed 21 pilots changed him into a despised collector. Now, what is this tragic flaw? In case you still don't know what the tragic flaw or weakness is, it is his love for his family or his myopic worldview. His myopic view that his family is the most important and are the most important people, and anything is justifiable if it is done for the welfare of the family. This is tragic flaw that he does not see beyond beyond his own family. Realizing in guilt. Now, I guess you can read the rest of it by yourself. I'll just stop it here for some moments. So you can read it, or you can just stop it right here and read the rest of the play by yourself. I will not explain it because it's basically all the bullshit again. And it's very simple. Let's just sum up. In the first section of this unit, we have discussed the structure and plot of All My Sons. While in this second unit section, we got to know Miller's views on tragedy and why the play All My Sons is primarily called a tragedy. Now, I highly recommend you try to answer these questions and take all of these as 20 marks questions. Like, this is very advisable. You should answer these questions, you should write this question and take each of them to be worth 20 marks, because yeah, they do this kind of drama in the exams. They will give you such simple questions which shouldn't be above like 3 or 4 marks, and they actually mark them down for 20 marks. So it is highly recommendable that you perform these questions, keeping in mind that they are 20 mark questions. After this, our second unit ends, and wait for the third unit. I'll make it when I'm not feeling lazy.